Did you know that you could do this in Warhammer 40k Darktide? Now I know, you probably think the Psyker build is just like a joke, like it's fun for a couple of games before you realize how terrible it is and you just swap back to your Flamestaff Psyker-Build. However, if the Kamikaze Psyker uses the correct build and it's played in the correct way, it can actually be pretty strong and, dare I say, consistent. Exactly this consistency has ever since the dawn of Crystalline Will and the Kamikaze Psyker been its main issue. I mean, you would be dealing decent damage, but only until you fell down to your last few wounds, where a single mistimed peril overcharge would insta-kill you. Although this is no longer an issue. Watch this. For some reason, if you use the correct Curio setup, your peril overcharge is unable to take you beneath 2 wounds, and this is regardless of you killing an elite or not with the explosion. This allows you to continue using the warp explosion indefinitely without worrying about getting elite kills. Now, you could just imagine my excitement discovering this, when seemingly nobody was talking about it. So, somebody has already made a video about this. Okay, but don't leave quite yet though, because the build I so proudly came up with has components that I've yet to see other people take advantage of, making it both strong but also really unique and fun. Just watch this short clip. Okay, so to show the build, the entire build is just made around the warp explosion and making it as powerful and effective as possible. And then we want to be using the bolt pistol, because the bolt pistol gets access to lethal proximity, which increases the radius of the warp explosion by further 25%. I feel like most people doesn't know that this blessing actually works on the warp explosion to the Psyker, but it does. But since we're using the bolt pistol, we need a melee weapon being able to produce a lot of peril, and that's why we're using the Blaze Force Sword Elise mark, because this exact mark, let me show you, allows you to use your special action continuously, gaining peril very quickly. And then we also want to be running as little warp resistance on the weapon as possible. You can see I have 10%, ideally we'd want 0, right, but that's very unlikely. And then you still want 80% damage and at least 60 mobility, giving you all their dodges. I think also Deflector is a really nice blessing on this build, because it gives a bit more survivability, which is really useful when you're running around with 2 wounds pretty much 90% of the games. And for Curios, you want 3+1 wound Curios. And the most important thing is that only one of them is running a +5% max health perk. If it's anything less or more than that, this exploit won't work, so one of them needs to be running the +5% max health. Besides from that, I like having +5% toughness on every single one of them, as well as combat ability regeneration, and the last 2 are optional if you're thinking of the perks. I actually like 15% corruption resistance, just because I like to take care of the little health pool I already have, so if anything more than that starts getting eaten by corruption, you have really little to work with. And then for talents, I like to use this one to start with, and that's because it has really good synergy with the Blaze Force Sword Elise mark, because the more peril you gain, the more toughness you're replenishing. And since the Elise mark Blaze Force Sword can gain peril so incredibly quickly, this actually gets you a lot of toughness. And then I also like having both the Soul Blaze talents, just because when you're starting to kill a lot of elites, it can actually accumulate a lot of Soul Blaze damage. And then for the Blitz, I really prefer having the Assail Blitzer, and that's because I really like the gameplay loop of first getting a parallel up with the Blaze 4 sword, and then going into Assail, and going into the Warp Explosion. The reason I really like the Telekind Shield is because when you're entering the animation of the Warp Explosion, you become really vulnerable. And I'm not really too worried about the melee enemies, because you can kind of just like move away from them before entering the animation of the Warp Explosion. But it's kind of... it's more difficult to control the ranged enemies, because they could be standing super far away from you and just shooting at you while you're in the animation and being really vulnerable. And that's why I like to fight within the Warp Shield. And the Warp Shield is obviously really nice as well, just because it's a super good asset to the rest of your team. It's one of the best supportive abilities in the game. And besides from this, I really like using Kinetic Deflection, because it has really good synergy with the Blaze 4 Sword's Deflector, allowing you to block pretty much everything and survive for a longer time and survive more easily. And then I really like having Warp Ghosts. Minus 80% passive quelling is actually a good thing for this build, I would say, just because you want to be at high parrots all the time, so you have an easier time blowing up. And then you obviously need Crystalline Will, which the entire build is built around. And for the keystones, I really like having Warp Siphon. I just think it's a really good keystone for the Psyker in general. And getting your combat ability back quicker is super useful, and the extra damage is useful. But maybe if you find another keystone to be better, you could use that. Alright, so that's the build. I wouldn't describe it as a very beginner friendly build, and I'm also not going to say that it outperforms other builds like the Flamestaff Psyker, because it obviously doesn't. But I would still say it's quite solid, and also really fun and rewarding to play, at least after playing something like 50 games as the Flamestaff Psyker. Now, I wouldn't call myself that good of a player, so please, if you decide to try out the build yourself, I would love to hear your feedback. Okay, without further ado, I'm just gonna show some gameplay now.
Disgusting, wasn't it?
What doesn't kill ya makes you stronger, yeah?
What tries to kill me dies.
You're here. Time to put that typewriter to work.
It's getting ready to explode.
You'll need to do some...
Analysis recommends data retrieval at this site.
Serve my beloved. You deserve it too, really.
Psyker exfiltration faltering. Connection lost. Compensate. Systems green. Uplink resumed. As you were.
Oh dear, what a blast! The dead have bomber now. Over there! Bad dog, 6 days. There you go, Grin. Kill it, kill it.
Run to your feet, my kindred!
Love it.